Yeah, so this is chapter 3. Ready for chapter 3? I personally think this is the most important part of a constitution because this deals with the fundamental rights and freedom of citizens. This is what protects you. This is what protects me as a citizen, right? So let's go right into it. It says, 1. Whereas the state has an obligation to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and freedoms. All persons of Jamaica are entitled to preserve that for themselves and future generations, the fundamental rights and freedom to which they are entitled by virtue of their inherent dignity as a person and as a citizen of a free and democratic society, right? So that's basically saying that's our responsibility. See, all persons under a responsibility to respect and uphold the rights of others recognized in this chapter. So we all have a responsibility to uphold and maintain the rights of other Jamaican citizens. The following provisions in this chapter shall have the effect for the purpose of affording protection to the rights and freedoms of persons as set out in those provisions, to the extent that those rights and freedoms do not prejudice the rights and freedoms of others. 2. Subject to section 18 and 49 and subsections 9 and 12 in this section, and safe only as may be demonstrably justified in a free democratic society. A. This chapter guarantees the right and freedom to set out in subsections 3 and 6 of this section in sections 14, 15, 16, and 17. B. The Parliament shall pass no law or organ of the state that take any action which abrogates, abridges, or infringes on these rights. 3. So the Parliament cannot pass any law to shake these rights. These are the foundation, the cornerstones of the Constitution. No bill, nothing can be passed to take away or strip away these rights. 3. The right and freedoms referred in section 2 are as follows. The right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof except in the execution of the sentence of a court in respect to a criminal offense of which the person can be convicted. All right, so it says like these rights, the life, basically saying that the death penalty, it's still on the books. Liberty is freedom, it's saying that basically the prison system, the legal system can restrict those liberties and security of a person. Not sure that there is any legal punishment against security, but yeah, these rights can be limited if it's within the framework of execution of a sentence in a court of law. Right. B, the right to free thought, conscience, belief, and observation of political doctrine. So with this right, I'm not sure how much freedom we're granted. So basically you can have any political thought or philosophy or idea you want to have, whether it be far right, far left, socialist, it could be capitalist. It doesn't matter. You have free thought. We're not in a state that is authoritarian and everybody has to be silent on their political thought process. And it goes on to say B, right to free expression is basically freedom of speech, freedom of artwork, basically freedom of how you dress and express yourself, being creatively. And D, the right to seek and receive distribution of or disseminate information, opinions, or ideas through any media, basically like what we're doing now. So we're seeking information, we're learning, we receive it through the forum, we can distribute it and disseminate it, and we can share opinions and ideas through any form of media. This is an important right. A lot of countries don't have this. A lot of countries cannot be sharing and expressing the way how they feel. So this is a very fundamental right. This protects the media. This protects us citizens. This protects even persons on a social media platform. It protects persons even using their WhatsApp, sending emails. Photographers, it affects everybody, it's all of us, because let's say I'm a teacher in a classroom and I'm teaching and I might bring across an idea, right? And it's within my right to promote that idea. Not really necessarily promote because I'm sticking to the curriculum, but if that idea is expressed, I should not be liable for sharing my opinion if asked. The right to freedom of peaceful assemblies and associations. So basically this would cover like churches or clubs, like groups. So like right to free assembly, church members assemble, that's free assembly. And if I'm keeping a get together, that's a right to assemble. During I must say during the pandemic, this right is limited and for a just cause, because they're trying to reduce the amount of contact with the persons catching the disease. However, this is a right that constitutionally we can argue that shouldn't be infringed on, as said in the sections above. But I'm not sure if there's another loophole to look at as it relates to this, because it's the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. So as long as the assembly is peaceful, we are entitled to it by constitutional law, and associated whoever we want to associate with, as long as it's not a criminal organization per se, right? And the right to free movement, that's also another thing that's restricted. The right to free movement, we're under quarantine, right? So we can't move that freely. So say there's a curfew in play or a zone of special operation, this could infringe on our right to movement. And it goes on to say, this is to say that every citizen of Jamaica to enter Jamaica, right? So you know that some people were stranded on ships and stranded abroad and were denied the right to enter Jamaica at a certain time, right? I'm not saying this to point out anything. It's just that it appeared here, and I'm making a correlation to current events, basically. So, second point, it says, every person lawfully in Jamaica has the right to move freely around throughout Jamaica. So you see, it goes back to what I was saying. And to reside in any part of Jamaica. And also, all of us have the right to leave Jamaica. That's what this says. Now, this can be controversial because if you look at this protects our constitutional rights, right? And a lot of this had been taken from us during the last probably 4 months, right? But it's for a good cause, because if the pandemic had spread, it would strain. Sometimes you have to look at things more realistic and broaden your horizons, because this protects your right in a normal situation, but we're in an emergency situation. So we have to question the Constitution's strength and protect us in all aspects of life, which is why we also need, we need to be kind of flexible and be more practical in how we approach certain things. All right. G, the right to equality before the law. So basically, if I'm trying to defend myself, I should be seen equal. I should be innocent before proven guilty, and I should be treated as a citizen of Jamaica first. That's what that is suggesting there. H, the right to equitable and humane treatment by any public authority in the exercise of any function. I, the right to freedom from discrimination on the grounds of being either male or female, race, place of origin, social class, color, religion, or political opinion. So if you're in a workplace and any of these factors cause probably your employees to discriminate against you or prevent you from getting a promotion or a pay raise or whatever may be the case, or if in your coworkers are denying you this privilege, it is unconstitutional. J, the right of everyone to be, one, protected from search of a person and property. So we're right, like law enforcement shouldn't like search a person and property. We have to give them the permission to do that. That's where this section is said. And so the right to protection of private and family and the privacy of the home. So basically, our private estate, it should be left alone, and we should not be forced to open our homes to any government entity. As long as it's a private property, it will be different for a business, because business is liable to like health inspections and other things like that you have to see as a public property and not a private property. And it says respect, it says protection of privacy of other properties and of communication, right? So this one says, right, privacy of communication. So basically, when you're talking on the phone, no one should be listening in or spying on that conversation or eavesdropping. So there's a case with this popular person in Jamaica who was incriminated based on the interception of his communication lines, and it set a precedent in how this law is viewed, because this didn't happen before. So this was the first time something like that was being used to convict someone. And it's basically saying in the Constitution that this should not be the case, because it said protection of privacy of other property and of communication, right? So let's say I'm talking to someone on my phone, and it's a private conversation. It's not a group chat or anything, right? And that person or myself might be called up on as a person of interest or whatever, right? For example, and let's say they got access to that. It is unconstitutional for the prosecution to use that against me in a court of law. However, that case, which I mentioned, I think it was in 2011, it had set a precedent that may have made an amendment to this, but this amendment that I'm quoting now, it's in 2011, that same year, and it was one of the issues that was addressed in that issue as well. All right, so moving on. Okay, the right of every child to such measure of protection as required by virtue of the status of being a minor as a part of the family or social state. Who is a citizen of Jamaica to publicly funded tuition in a public educational institution at the primary, pre-primary levels, right? So it basically says, well, like as a child, a citizen of Jamaica, that's a child of the state, right? They should be to publicly fund tuition in a public education institution, right? So basically, government should pay all the auxiliary fees and school fees for children at the primary level and pre-primary levels. So that's from kinder to 6th grade. There should be no school fee payments. That's in the Constitution, right? And it says the right to enjoy a healthy, next point, the right to enjoy a healthy and productive environment free from threat of injury or damage or environmental abuse and degradation of ecological heritage. So basically saying, right, your surrounding wherein there should be no threat to you. There should be health and safety procedures to prevent damage, like maybe some construction is taking place and it might be causing a hazard. This Constitution protects against that and gives you right to claim negligence on the part of someone else that put the structure or that situation in your environment. You could be compensated by suing that person or entity for having that threat, or even other things such as environmental abuse, such as noise pollution, water pollution, damaging the water in the surrounding. Those persons are liable as well to protect that fundamental right. The air quality, like for example, like Riverton Dump, right? It's a constitutional right of ours to be protected from the air pollution that goes off by the Riverton Dump, because persons have respiratory illnesses and so forth, and they get ill and they have to foot the medical bill for it. But within the Constitution, we're protected from environmental abuse, and it says degradation of ecological heritage. This one alludes to now the mining that's scheduled to take place in the Coptic country, because that's our ecological heritage. This is a unique land feature in Jamaica that is protected by the Maroons, because the Coptic country covers the area, which includes the Akompo Maroons and other Maroon communities as well. It's a World Heritage Site. It's one of a kind karst topography in the world, and it's seen only one other place, I think that's in the Black Forest in Germany. So it's special, and that is preserved under the Jamaican Constitution. As seen here, ecological heritage also covered all the indigenous and endemic animals that are in Jamaica as well, right? And the right of every Jamaican citizen. 1. Who is qualified to register at the elector of elections and the House of Representatives? So be registered. And basically covers the universal adult suffrage law that was passed in 1944, which says all Jamaicans over the age of, it was 21 at the time, is now 18, have the right to vote and should not be denied that right to register to vote within elections, right? That maintains our democracy. Who is so registered to vote in a free and fair election? Next, the right of every Jamaican citizen to be granted a passport. Get your passports, important. And not to be denied or deprived, except thereof by due process of law. So if there's a criminal charge and they have to withhold it for whatever reason, that can be an exemption, right? Next, it says the right to protection from torture or inhumane or degrading punishment or any other treatment provided in subsection 6 or 7. So when police interrogations, they should not torture you, use any inhumane or degrading tactics or punishment. Like, I didn't know this, but I saw them being like degrading to persons under the quarantine, like telling them to squats and stuff and jump on one leg and all type of things. But it's unconstitutional. It's not unconstitutional. They shouldn't be doing this type of stuff, as seen here in Article O, right to protection from torture or inhumane or degrading punishment, and that would be seen as inhumane or degrading, more degrading than inhumane. But you see what I'm saying with this point, right? All right. P, it says the right to freedom of a person as provided in section 14. Q, the protection of property rights as provided in section 15. R, the right to due process as provided in section 16. S, the right to freedom of religion as provided in section 17. So most of these things we basically covered them already, but it is reinforced in other parts of the Constitution. And number 4 says this chapter applies to all laws that bind the legislature, the executive, and all public authorities. 5, a provision of this chapter. So it says, go back to 4. This law applies to all laws that binds the legislator and the government. So that's basically saying this applies to all the lawmakers, policymakers, and all the the government enforcement arms like the police and military. That's what it's saying, right? 5. A provision of this chapter binds all natural or juristic persons as if and to the extent that it is applicable to take account of the nature of the rights and nature of any duty imposed by that right. 6. No person shall be subjected. We went through that already. Nothing contained in or due on the authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of subjection 6. So it should not be opposed to the extent that the law in question authorizes the infliction of any description of punishment, which was lawful in Jamaica immediately before the commencement of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. The execution of a death sentence imposed after the commencement of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms on any person or offense against the law of Jamaica shall not be held inconsistent with the contravention of the section thereof. So this basically is the part of the Constitution that took away the capital punishment law. So basically, this says scrap that. This is the thing, and it can't be in contravention, basically, with this law to prevent torture and degrading, the inhumane treatment, because it's saying that capital punishment is an inhumane part of punishing someone. For example, right? If a person is on death row, right, they're gonna be hanged or taken out by other means, and they're waiting, right? So they're waiting for a year. It could be like the 1st of December, they're scheduled to be executed, right? And so they're told this from January, and they have to wait 12 months. You know, the mental, psychological torture that person goes through in waiting that long, right? And say they were given a day closer to January. Say they were told January 1st that they were going to be executed on February 1st, right? And February 1st passed, and they don't know what date, but they know that it's soon. The mental, psychological effect on that person is immense. So that's one argument against capital punishment as well as other things like they might not have the proper legal framework, but just the psychological effects of the torture on a person on death row is a major reason why this part of the Constitution was in the provision, right? That's one of the main reasons, right? Just putting that there. Oh, it went on to say that, all right, hey, it says the length of time which elapses between the date which the sentence is imposed and the date which the sentence can be executed. Okay. Yeah, so basically talking about the execution of a death sentence and unlawful and lawlessness that to be held inconsistent to the reason, yeah. So, all right, so you say what I said. I didn't know that explanation is there, but it's actually there. It says the execution of a death sentence imposed after should be in accordance with that. Yes, so it should be humane. It shouldn't put the person through a long, tedious, torturous. And it says B, the physical condition or arrangement under which such person is detained pending execution, the execution of the sentence by virtue of law practice in any force immediately before the commencement of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. So this is basically addressing the death penalty, basically. 9. Number 9. More positive, hopefully. Nothing contained in or done under the authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of subsection 3 F. If this section 14 and 16, to the extent that the law authorizes the talking in relation to the person detained or whose freedom of movement can be restricted by the virtue of law, by that law, of measures that are reasonably justifiable for the purposes of dealing with the situation that exists during the period of public emergency, or public disaster. So like, no, we are in a period of a public emergency or disaster, so they shouldn't be punishable in that period of time, really. 10. A person who is detained or whose freedom of movement has been restricted by the virtue of the law referred in subsection 9 may request a review of the case at any time during the period of detention or restriction, but any request subsequent to the initial request shall be made earlier than 6 weeks after he last made such request. If he makes such request, he shall be reviewed promptly by an independent and impartial tribunal, juror, which shall be immediately established pursuant to law and presided over by a person appointed by the Chief Justice of Jamaica from among persons qualified to be appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court. Right, so some select group of people, not just regular jurors, some persons qualified, very qualified, should preside over this case. 11. On any review by tribunal in pursuance of subsection 10 of the case of any person who is detained or whose freedom of movement had been restricted, the tribunal may give direction to the authority by whom the detention or restriction was ordered concerning the continued detention and restriction of movement of that person, and the authority shall act in accordance with such directions. Nothing contained in or done under the authority of any law in force immediately before the commencement of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. Yeah, so relating to sexual offenses, obscene publications. So sexual offenses, that's basically assault, rape, and other sexual crimes. Obscene publication, this is like cyber crimes are like threats, basically. Any obscene thing that's against the Constitution, that like maybe infringing on someone else's rights. Offenses regarding life of the unborn. So this could be talking about abortion or health malpractice of a pregnant mother or other parties involved in harming the life of someone that's unborn. 13. In this section, public education. Yeah, right. So basically, this is a preface going on to the next section. Right? It means an all-age school, a primary school is maintained or assisted by the government. So you basically say all of these schools, right? All these public schools should be funded by the government or at least assisted by the government of Jamaica. So every public school is constitutionally under the law of Jamaica. And they start doing it with even some semi-private schools as well. They get assistance and grants from the government of Jamaica because it's their constitutional responsibility to the people of Jamaica to fund the education, right? 14, protection of freedom of the person. 1, no person shall be deprived of his liberty except on reasonable grounds in accordance with fair procedures established by law following circumstances. A, in consequence of his unfitness to plead to a criminal charge. B, the execution of sentence or order of a court, whether Jamaica or elsewhere, in respect of criminal offense of which he can be convicted. Right? Maybe C, in execution of an order of the Supreme Court or Court of Appeal or such other court as may be prescribed by Parliament on the grounds of his contempt of any such court or of any other court or tribunal. D, the execution of the order of a court made to secure the fulfillment of any obligation imposed on him by law. E. For the purpose of bringing him before a court in execution of the order of court. F. The arrest or detention of a person. I. For the purpose of bringing him before the competent legal authority on reasonable suspicion of him having committed an offense, or where it is reasonably necessary to prevent him from committing an offense. G. In the case of a person who has not attained the age of 18 years old as a minor, for the purposes of his care and protection. H. The detention of a person for the prevention of spreading of infectious or contagious disease containing a serious public threat or health suffering, mental disorder, addicted to drug or alcohol, is necessary to take it for his care and treatment to prevent from him harming himself or others. So you can detain these persons if they are public risk or a risk to themselves, basically. It's saying that to provide a different avenue for that detention. The arrest or detention of a person who is not a citizen of Jamaica to prevent his unauthorized entry into Jamaica, or against whom action is taken with the view to deportation or extradition or lawful removal or taking of proceedings relating thereto. 2. Any person who is arrested or detained shall have the right to communicate with or visit by his spouse, partner, or family member, religious counselor, and a medical practitioner of his choice. B. At the time of his arrest or detention, as soon as is reasonably practicable, to be informed in a language which he understands for a reason of arrest or detention. So, if the person come from overseas and you want to detain him or arrest him, say he comes from Cuba and he doesn't understand English, you'd have to translate and inform him of these charges in Spanish. Say I'm Jamaican and English is my first language. I have to understand reasonably what these charges are within my native language or whatever language that person speaks. There should be someone that can communicate reasonably and inform him of those charges, right? See, where he is charged with an offense, to be informed with a language he understands of the nature of and the changes. D, to communicate with and retain an attorney at law. Right, so he has to be able to retain an attorney. That's a right of his. 3, any person who is arrested or detained shall be entitled to be tried within a reasonable time. A, shall be brought forthwith as soon as is reasonably practicable before an officer authorized by law or court. Okay. 2, release either unconditionally or upon reasonable condition to secure his attendance at trial or at any other stage of proceeding. Or if he is not released as mentioned in paragraph A2, shall be promptly brought before a court which may thereupon release him, provided in that paragraph. 4, any person awaiting trial and detained in custody shall be entitled to bail on reasonable condition unless sufficient cause is shown for keeping him in custody. 5, any person deprived of his liberty shall be treated humanely and with respect for the intent of the dignity of the person. Right? 15, protection of property rights. 1, no property of any description shall be compulsory taken possession of, and no intent or right over the property of any description shall be compulsory acquired except by or under provisions of a law that A. prescribes the principles on which the manner in which the compensation thereof is determined and given. B. secures to any person claiming an interest in or right over such property of access to a court for the purpose of establishing such interests or rights, if any, determining compensation, if any, to which he is entitled, and enforcing his right to such compensation. 2. Nothing in this section shall be construed as affecting the making or operation of any law so far as it provides for the taking of possessions or acquisition of property. A. In satisfaction of any tax rate or due. Right? So if you're not paying your tax, or you due your tax, or you're not meeting the required rate, you should not be stripped of that property right. B. By way of penalty for breach of the law, whether under civil process or conviction to criminal. So if you're a criminal and you're being convicted, you should still retain your property rights. C. Upon the attempted removal of the property in question out of or into the Jamaican contravention of any law. D. By way of taking a sample for the purpose of any law. C. Where the property consists of an animal upon its being found trespassing or staying. F. As an incident of a lease, tenancy, license, mortgage, charge, bill of sale, pledge, or contract. F. By way of vesting or administration of trust property, enemy property, or property of person, adjudging or otherwise declared bankrupt or insolvent, persons of unsound mind, diseased persons, or bodies corporate or incorporate in the course of being wound up. H. In the execution of judgments, orders of court. I. By the reason of it being dangerous, state, or injurious to the health of human beings, animals, or plants. J. In consequence of any law with respect to limitation of actions. K. For so long may be necessary for the purpose of any examination, investigation, trial, or inquiry. In the case of land, the carrying out thereon. I. Of work of soil conservation or the conservation of other natural resources, right? 2. Of agricultural development or improvement which the owner or occupier of the land has been required and has, without reasonable lawful excuse, refused or failed to carry out. So if you have excess land and you were charged or tasked to farm on the land and you're not farming on the land, then you will be restricted because the land should be used, or something like that example, right? Basically. Nothing in this section should be construed as affecting or making operation of any law so far as it makes such provisions as reasonably required for the protection of the environment or provides for orderly marketing or production of growth of or extradition of any agricultural product, mineral, or any art or any article or thing prepared for the market or manufactured thereof for a reasonable restriction of the use of any property in the interest of safeguarding the interests of others or protection of tenants, license, or others having rights over such property. Nothing in this section shall be construed as if affecting, making or operation of any law compulsory, taking possession of public interest over any property where the property interest right held by a body corporate which is established for public purposes by any law in which no monies have been invested other than monies provided by Parliament. So all public funded corporations are exempt from the clauses above, basically. Where an order is made under law which provides for compulsory acquisition of property, the court may have regard to A, any hardship that may reasonably be expected to cause my person by the operation order, or B, be used in ordinary made of the property or intended use of the property. In this section, number 6, in this section, compensation means consideration to be given to a person